Welcome to Another Day. This is my new late-night comedy series where I'll be recapping the latest and greatest news stories. Well, maybe not greatest. Tragicest, devastatingest, brutalist. Okay, now I'm just naming Holocaust movies. You get the idea. Anyway, it is another day, so let's get into it. Obviously, a lot of news happening. Cory Booker went all musical theater kid at a karaoke bar by refusing to give up the mic on the Senate floor.
I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business of the United States Senate for as long as I am physically able.
And if you're someone who is not worried about the negative effects of air pollution, smoking, gun violence, or climate change for you and your family, that's awesome because neither is this administration, since today they laid off thousands of HHS workers, which includes people at the FDA and the CDC.
The Trump administration, alongside billionaire ally Elon Musk, has set in motion a dramatic plan to slash 10,000 health jobs across key federal agencies, including the CDC, FDA, and NIH.
One employee at the FDA referred to today's layoffs as a bloodbath. Coincidentally, a bloodbath is also RFK's remedy for the measles. But before we move on, I do have to address a certain visitor that graced the Oval Office late yesterday.
A friend of mine, Kid Rock, sometimes referred to as Bob. I know him as Bob, but he's been a good friend for a long time, many years, and he's been after something that is for the good of a lot of people, including, in particular, the public.
Holy shit! Something that is for the good of a lot of people, including, in particular, the public. Is Kid the Bob Rock about to solve America's healthcare crisis?
And having to do with ticket sales and scalping and all of the gouging that you have been reading about that's gotten worse and worse with time. And I didn't know too much about it, but I checked it out, and it is a big problem.
So taking this as a no on the healthcare thing.
Like anyone who's bought a concert ticket in the last decade, maybe 20 years, no matter what your politics are, knows that it's a conundrum. You buy a ticket for $100, by the time you check out, it's $170. You don't know what you can charge for, but more importantly, these bots. You know, they come in to get all the good tickets to your favorite shows you want to go to, and then they're relisted immediately for sometimes a 400% or 500% markup.
Now, to be fair here to Bob, I agree. It does suck that scalpers and bots have turned buying concert tickets into a goddamn nightmare. So Trump signed an executive order which tasks the IRS to make sure that ticket scalpers fully comply with the law, a task that I'm sure the IRS is going to have plenty of time to handle now that he's cutting half of their fucking workforce. So the next time that anybody out there can't seem to get a regular price concert ticket, don't just blame the bots, blame this asshole. Oh, and I just have to say, for a guy who has been so insanely vocal about his discomfort with people who aren't straight, you sure love raiding Liberace's closet. And I know that right-wing media doesn't give two shits about hypocrisy, but
why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
I just hope that part-time journalist and full-time fashion cop Brian Glenn gives Kid Rock an earful. Moving on, as I mentioned a moment ago, Cory Booker pulled an all-nighter and an all-todayer on the Senate floor to show that he's not afraid to take a stand.
Booker took to the podium at 7 o'clock last night saying he would go on as long as he could because he feels the country is in crisis.
These are not normal times in America. And they should not be treated as such. John Lewis, so many heroes before us would say that this is the time to stand up, to speak up. This is the time to get in some good trouble, to get into necessary trouble.
And hey, bravo to Cory Booker for honoring the legacy of John Lewis and for breaking the record for longest speech in the Senate's history. And while some may say that standing on the Senate floor for more than 25 hours isn't the end-all be-all way to fight Republicans, I'd love to see these senators do it without falling backwards into their star-spangled shower chairs. And it was another day of the federal government taking a dump on the Constitution when ICE made a little oopsie by deporting a man to El Salvador who had protected legal status.
The government admits here that ICE was aware that this man had protected status here in the U.S., and due to an administrative error, they put him on one of these flights anyways, Vlad. And according to their filing, he wasn't originally on the plane, but some people were taken off, and then he was added and on the list of potential deportees. They hadn't notated that protected status that he was bestowed by the United States. So he really should never have been on this flight, but they're now claiming that they can't bring him back.
Administrator error. You're not the fucking Geek Squad. When people in that van make an administrator error, it doesn't end with someone getting ripped away from their family. Now, while J.D. Vance, Caroline Leavitt, and various other members of this White House might be refusing to admit what a giant fuck-up this is, there is at least one Trump backer who's breaking rank.
You got to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting, like, lassoed up and deported and sent to, like, El Salvador prisons. Like, that kind of shit.
Get scared? Dude, we've been scared. And if you're scared, I'm pretty sure you can get a meeting with Trump to unfuck all of this. That is, of course, as long as you're decked out in hillbilly couture. Moving on, you may not have known it, but it was Election Day in America. And I have to say, for a year that has so far felt like one big prank on the nation, holding an election on April 1st just felt cruel. But voters headed to the polls in Florida and Wisconsin for a pair of special elections. In Florida, 2 House seats were up for grabs. In Florida's 1st congressional district, Democratic candidate and person whose first name makes Ron DeSantis squeamish, Gay Valamon faced off against Republican Jimmy Expecto Patronus in a battle to see who would fill the seat vacated by Matt Gaetz, who, as we all know, resigned in November when Trump nominated him to become Attorney General. And that's gotta sting, right? You quit your job because you think a promotion is on lock, but then the world takes a second glance at your resume and you realize that under the experience section, you listed having sex with underage women. Bummer. The other seat was in Florida's 6th district, where Democrat Josh Wheel was up against Republican Randy Fine, who truly has the least inspiring campaign slogan I've ever seen. Fine. Now, this seat is the one left open by current and, let's be honest, soon-to-be former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Waltz's group chat fuck-up was so egregious, I don't think he'll ever be able to live it down. I actually pray that from now until the end of time, every restaurant host will call out, "Waltz Party of 3, and when Mike walks up to say it's actually just him and his wife, the host responds, "Sorry, I just assumed that Jeffrey Goldberg was joining you." So how did these races shake out? Well, in what is sadly just another day, Florida Republicans won both seats. But while Florida's, the race that everybody had their eyes on today was for a seat on Wisconsin's Supreme Court, where liberal candidate Susan Crawford faced off against, well, basically Elon Musk.
Billionaire Elon Musk is putting money into yet another election, this time a contest for a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, usually a pretty sleepy affair. But here he is last night handing out $2 million checks at a town hall in Green Bay. It's a prize, he says, for voters who support his pro-Republican PAC.
That's right. Elon was in full force holding another electoral sweepstakes, and if there's one thing that patriotic Americans love, it is a chance at some cold, hard, election-interfering cash. But Elon was there buying the stumping for Republican candidate Brad Schimmel, a man who claims to be completely nonpartisan, but who also desperately sought out Trump's endorsement and even dressed up like the garbage man in chief for last year's Halloween when his rock band played a party. That Schimmel maracaying out to the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil, which is one of the most spot-on music choices I have ever heard in my life. Even more than when Don Jr.'s jukebox picks was Eric Clapton's Cocaine. The race in Wisconsin has become the most expensive judicial election in American history, with almost $100 million being spent. Now, to be fair, billionaires on both sides poured money into this race, but no one made it as personal as Elon. The billionaire dumped millions into this race himself, going so far as to hand out literal million-dollar checks to voters. Wisconsin's Attorney General Josh Kaul did sue Elon for what Kaul said, and everybody can plainly see, is a violation of state law, but the state Supreme Court declined to intervene. But before that decision, you'll never guess who got randomly assigned to the case.
When Wisconsin's Attorney General filed suit against Elon Musk Friday, state Supreme Court candidate Susan Crawford and current Dane County judge found her name assigned to the case.
I heard from a staff member and then immediately was called by another judge in the Dane County Circuit Court who likewise filled me in on some of the details, and I said I need to recuse.
You needed to recuse? Why? For fear of the public thinking you're not impartial? Your opponent seems totally okay with his biggest supporter buying votes in the state. See, Democrats are expected to fight fair when Republicans do not give a flying fuck about even the slightest appearance of being objective. Does anyone really think Brad Schimmel would have recused himself when Tesla's lawsuit comes before the state Supreme Court? Oh, sorry, did you think that Elon's investment in Wisconsin politics was purely driven by the opportunity to elect a nonpartisan judge who would restrict abortion rights, support discriminatory voter ID laws, and back Republican redistricting? Yeah, turns out there might also be another driver.
Tesla sued Wisconsin in January over a law barring car manufacturers from opening dealerships. That case could eventually reach the state Supreme Court.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, only third parties are allowed to operate car dealerships, not auto manufacturers. And Musk argues that, quote, independent dealers wouldn't meet Tesla's standards and says selling vehicles at its own dealerships is in the public interest because unaffiliated dealers' prices are higher and less transparent. Transparent? You hate transparency. You lie about voter fraud. You lie about Doge's accomplishments. I mean, for fuck's sake, you lie about your scalp. My man, get whatever plugs you want, just don't claim to be the transparency guy and buy yourself a full head of hair. But despite all of Elon's money and his full head of definitely natural hair, he wasn't able to pull this one out for Brad Schimmel, as the race was called for Susan Crawford and Wisconsin retained its liberal majority on the court. In what Republicans were hoping would be a runaway victory for Brad, it was instead Crawford who won so convincingly, the race was called by Decision Desk HQ all of 11 minutes after the polls closed. I can't really think of any other way to describe this except to call it a bloodbath.